Welcome to One Haas, a podcast devoted to bringing the Haas community closer together through your stories. I'm your host, Sean Lee, and my mission is to help open our eyes to the network we never knew we had. This is Sean, and today I'm here with Gagan Dhaliwal of the full-time MBA 2019 program. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm originally born and raised just outside of Toronto, Canada. Grew up in an immigrant household. Like a lot of Indo-Canadian kids, there was a huge pressure growing up to do something in the sciences, in the STEM fields.
Yeah.
The stereotype is always engineering or medicine.
Or law.
In my case, I chose medicine.
Okay.
For me, it was a great way to combine everything I had learned in the classroom, everything from economics to biology to anthropology, and apply it in a really meaningful way clinically. And it was a credential that gave me a lot of options. I can do everything from teaching to doing clinical work to, doing malpractice work, testifying in court.
Right.
Now, I was very fortunate to be in a country that had a universal healthcare system that functioned extraordinarily well.
And that's
very
wealthy.
What,
Canada?
In Canada. Mm-hmm. But even in a well-functioning healthcare system, you start to notice things that if you don't work in a clinical setting, you'll never appreciate.
Right.
I started to realize how much dysfunctionality there was in the healthcare system, how much intransigence there was. You're delivering very expensive care provided by extremely autonomous, competent, and highly educated individuals in a very, chaotic and unpredictable environment. I mean, I can't tell you, it's funny. When we were in operations, we talked a lot about, queue times and what affects queue times.
Yeah.
And when I was sitting in that class, I was thinking the entire time, man, I wish in med school somebody had taught that to us. I wish in med school somebody had taught me the concept of how to improve the customer experience when they're waiting in line, for 3 hours in your clinic or in the emergency room.
Yeah.
I wish I had the corporate finance skills to understand, okay, why is it that, our clinic costs are so high, or why is it so expensive to run a hospital, and how can we add value to a hospital through capital structure? These are things that, as a clinician, I saw intimately how, this dysfunctionality affected patients and clinicians. And now coming to business school, I realized that many of the problems are rooted in the business of medicine.
Right.
So for me, my experience through medicine, I was a primary care physician. I did residency. I also did some health policy research on the side. So I really learned at an abstract academic level about Canadian healthcare and global healthcare.
I noticed you published some papers.
Yeah. It's sort of in palliative care economics. So looking at, cost data and outcomes data for end-of-life care, and seeing how different settings of care and different models of care would affect outcomes.
I see.
I even worked a little bit in entrepreneurship because I thought, I almost had a romantic notion of what a startup would be like, but it was a fascinating way to really quickly learn about US and Canadian healthcare, learn about business, and learn about the challenges of innovating in a field like healthcare. Yeah. So doing all those things, I realized that I don't think I could practice full-time clinically forever. I know I want to do something at the intersection of business or healthcare administration and consulting, maybe a startup, or maybe I'll do clinical work with a little bit of policy work on the side. But either way, I needed some time to explore that nexus, and I needed some time to develop a business network, develop a new set of skills, just be in a new country and really stretch myself in ways that I'd never been stretched before.
So that's what brought you to Haas, I imagine.
Yeah, so that's sort of after residency, I decided, I needed that space, and the MBA was a great option, and Haas provided me with a great value proposition, and here I am.
If I remember correctly, you did your residency in Vancouver.
Yeah, so I did my primary care residency. I finished in 2 years in Vancouver. I did my training at McMaster University, which is just west of Toronto, close to Buffalo. And after residency, I came directly here.
Nice.
I work a little bit on the side, but I'm here predominantly. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what has your experience at Haas been like so far?
It's been incredible. It's been, I'll tell you, it's not what I expected in a very good way. I'll start with the basics. So academics, it's been really fun. I mean, going through the course sometimes can be a bit tedious, but the great thing is the academics, they structure us in cohorts.
Yeah.
So immediately I've gotten to know, 60 to 70 people pretty well, and a handful of people really, really well. I've learned a lot of amazing things.
I couldn't agree with you more, by the way.
I've learned, some of the...
I was a business finance background for undergrad, and still having, run my own business for the past 10 years, coming here, I realized there's so much that I don't know. So it's been really valuable for me as well.
And you know what it is for me? What I really love is much of my learning has come from just turning to my classmates and saying, hey, where are you from? What do you think of what we've learned in class? Or is this what you did at your workplace? Just those casual, spontaneous conversations. That's where through osmosis, you learn so much.
Right.
I've loved the academics and the learning environment. The sort of the extracurricular life here is incredible. Tons of clubs in and outside of Haas. And then probably the most important thing for most students, which is recruiting. There's a very, very robust infrastructure, both inside and outside of Haas, that's helped me get the sort of job I know I wouldn't get as an international student and as a clinician. There are incredible resources, the program office, my peers. I can't tell you the number of alumni connections I've made just by asking peers, hey, do you know anyone at this place? Over a random coffee or a meal at iHouse. So it's been incredible in those respects. And then, of course, as someone who's new to California, it's a great place to live. Lots of opportunity, great weather. A little pricey, but it's a really awesome place. You'll meet some incredible people here. So I've been loving it so far.
Can you tell us a little bit about some of the clubs you're a part of?
Yeah, so I'm part of a few clubs. I'm actually the co-president of the Haas Politics and Policy Club. We're sort of an affinity/industry club. We focus primarily on providing a venue vis-a-vis events, speaker series, social events, etc., whereby students of all political and ideological backgrounds can come together and openly and empathetically discuss issues related to politics and policy that affect them personally, professionally, and that'll ultimately shape the society and the economy in which they live.
Yeah.
Really, I think a lot of people think of us as a few policy wonks sitting around talking about, midterm elections. But really what we are, we want to have interesting, fun conversation. And we want people from every single program. Our club isn't, history majors who work for politicians on K Street or in Capitol Hill. We want economists, bankers, startup people, physicians. We have I actually advertised our last event, the Trump tax policy. It's a panel debate. We're actually, so check this out. We're bringing the Dean of Goldman, the Professor Maria Karkovic, who's a macroeconomist here. She teaches the MBA macroeconomics course.
Okay.
And we're bringing in a writer from the American Enterprise Institute, which is a libertarian think tank in Washington. They have very close connections with the Republican Party at the national level.
Right.
We're bringing all three of them to campus on March 21st at 6 p.m. here in Chu Hall, room N340. And we're going to have an hour and a half debate on the Trump tax policy. I've brought in a very politically diverse set of speakers. It's free for all students. We've opened it up to Bolt students and Goldman students.
Okay.
So anybody and EW, evening and weekend MBA students, part-time MBA students, and undergrads. So we encourage everybody to come out. It's free to register. There's food and drinks. And the key thing is, this is the sort of event where everybody, no matter who you are, you're going to pay taxes.
Yeah.
I'm an international student. I've been here for less than a year and I have to file a tax return.
Right.
You've been here most of your life, right? You said you have your own businesses?
Yeah.
So you've dealt with, what it's like to have to get financing, deal with taxation, deal with, government bureaucracy. So these issues matter to business people.
Yeah, business tax were due yesterday, actually.
Exactly.
March 15th.
So we want to have a politically diverse, open, and safe space where we can just talk about these issues, where people can challenge each other, people can learn, people can have fun. And who knows, you may meet your future startup co-founder.
Yeah.
Or worst come to worst, you just learn something that'll save you a few bucks on your tax return.
Yeah.
Or you learn something that, that you can take home to your Thanksgiving conversation, right?
Yeah.
So it's events like these where we really want to bring students from all backgrounds, especially within Haas. We want evening and weekend students. We want part-time and undergrad MBA students because, especially evening and weekend students, the breadth of work experience and the maturity that you have,
right,
it's blown me away.
Right.
I've done everything from case prep to having a beer with evening and weekend students. And it's just, I've learned so much from you guys.
Right.
And I think at the club level, there needs to be more collaboration because so much of the Haas experience is rooted in the clubs.
Yeah. We'll definitely share a link below on the podcast for that event. Absolutely. Send that over to me. Let's talk a little bit about something that you mentioned to me I thought was really interesting about giving more exposure to international students and kind of sharing the student experience of international students at Haas.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sometimes laugh that I'm an international student, but only because somebody drew an arbitrary line at the 49th parallel. My, culturally, economically, socially, Canada is very, very, very similar to the United States, especially California, which has a reputation for being a more sort of liberal, progressive state. But even as somebody who isn't born here and as somebody who had to go through the recruiting process without U.S. work authorization, it was an eye-opener in terms of sort of the opportunities and upsides, but also some of the challenges of being an international student or, technically defined as somebody who doesn't have permanent work authorization, who doesn't have a green card or citizenship. Culturally, it's amazing, the diversity of America, the wealth, the opportunity, the beauty. Like every day I wake up and, you see the Golden Gate Bridge, you see the hills, and, you realize just how blessed you are. And, when I walk outside, I hear people speaking, Tamil, Spanish, Mandarin. I mean, you hear all sorts of languages, and it really is an incredible place where you can meet people who you would otherwise never meet in life. And that's been an awesome thing as an international student. And I'm coming from a very diverse city, Toronto. So on the other hand, I think there can be challenges. Certainly as an international student, I think one of the things a lot of us struggle with is the culture around how recruiting happens. I personally didn't find this as challenging, but when speaking to students, especially from countries, for example, in Eastern Europe, Eastern Asia, etc., they often talked about the challenges of networking, the concept of your ability to get a job being largely grounded in your personal relationship and your sort of how affable you are at a cocktail party.
Coffee chat,
and having to do this repetitively, that sometimes can be challenging. Of course, it can be also, it's very challenging when half the companies and firms won't hire you.
Because of your visa status?
Because of your visa status, but also because, and this is, we talk about politics and policy, just the election of Donald Trump. That changed things. I mean, I sometimes wonder, and I really hope, this happens. I don't know if you remember when Trump passed the travel ban. I can imagine there were probably students at Haas that were affected. Students from those countries who not only struggle to, adapt to the culture here. It can be a challenge, who have to go through the challenges of the visa process, but now face political uncertainty completely out of their control that tangibly affects their ability to enter the country. So I think, and especially everything that's been happening politically, certainly international students who have to pass the border every day, we feel that. I think those things have, it's led to a sort of up and down experience at times. Sometimes it's euphoric and amazing. And at other times, you realize how challenging it can be to be an immigrant and how in many ways how privileged we are. Just, some of the people at Haas, just you listen to the backgrounds, the things they've overcome, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I imagine part of the attraction of a top US MBA program, and I'm speaking as somebody who didn't even consider applying to Canadian schools at all, is that the elite business education and many of the elite opportunities that many of these students seek are concentrated in the United States. If you're a banker or a consultant, I suppose that's an exception because, Goldman Sachs and Bain they have offices all over the world. But if you are interested in tech, 90% of the top tech companies are within driving distance of here. Even as somebody who was I was in Vancouver, there's a good tech scene in Vancouver, but ultimately everyone wanted to go to Silicon Valley. I imagine it's similar for finance people in New York. I do agree, though. I would like to see more openness to international exchange, international opportunities. I live at an international house, and that's been an incredible experience, just meeting people from all over the world. It matters, in part because, the challenges that U.S. firms and the U.S. economy faces, these aren't, other nations have faced this challenge before, and other nations offer other firms abroad offer very interesting solutions at every level of business and public policy. So I think it behooves us to have more international exchange.
What is this International House that you speak of on campus?
Oh, so International House it's an institution on campus. It's actually a few minutes away from Haas, just down the road on Piedmont. It's quite famous because a lot of Haasies eat there at lunch. Between classes, they have a buffet lunch. It was a dormitory that was, I believe it was founded and originally endowed by Rockefeller. And the goal was to promote international cooperation and understanding. So it has a very famed history. It was one of the first dorms to be integrated, one of the first racially in the United States, one of the first to have, women in the dorm. You see, in the 40s and 50s, you see people with turbans, you see people with hijabs, you see people from all walks of life.
Yeah.
It's remarkably progressive, and it has a phenomenal academic history. There's several Nobel laureates. A famous Canadian diplomat involved in the hostage crisis in Iran in the late 70s. He was an alumni here. A lot of Eric, what's his name, the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. He was an alumni at iHouse.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of history, and it's a nice added layer to the Haas experience, meeting people from all over the world and learning from them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that. I mean, I passed by a couple times. I never really knew the history of it.
But the brunch is great. And they have a great cafe too. They have great happy hour deals.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now that you're almost halfway through your program, what are some advice you can give to incoming students?
I think the most important thing is I'll frame it like this. There's a plethora of options, no matter where you come from and what you want to do. There are so many options. It's almost impossible to form a hypothesis and for it to be perfectly correct.
Right.
I think the important thing in business school is, even before you come in, form a hypothesis about what your experience and your post-MBA career would look like, or you want it to look like, based on your prior experiences and credentials. And based on that hypothesis, test it as early as possible. So once you get to business school, you really hit the ground running. It catches a lot of people off. And my recommendation would be to immediately start testing that hypothesis. Start recruiting, start joining clubs, start contributing to the Haas community, or stretching yourself in ways that you hadn't before. So really just start from day one. You only have 2 years here. It really, really flies by. And given how busy many of our, many Haasis are working professionals, they have part-time jobs, they're parents, they have other obligations. It can fly by really quickly. And you do only get one shot at this. So I would really recommend hit the ground running the moment you get to campus in terms of academics, extracurriculars, and especially recruiting. And if your hypothesis is wrong, you'll have learned something, and you then pivot, so to speak. Sorry for the cliche. You pivot to a new hypothesis. It's a lot easier to pivot from an old hypothesis to a new hypothesis than to start from scratch in January.
That's really astute. My last question for you is, how can our listeners help you, or help you with the club?
Well, I'll say one thing. So I'm saying this in part as the president of a politics club, but also as somebody who thoroughly enjoys public speaking, debating. As somebody who's watched countless Oxford Union debates on YouTube, I really enjoy public speaking and debate. I really enjoy the art and the art of that. And I don't think we do it enough. And I think there are many students here who would grow immensely and would love to just step out of their shell and really be open and vulnerable in front of their classmates. Furthermore, I think there's incredible business and leadership value to be able to being able to speak publicly and advocate even for opinions you may not necessarily agree with. I'm sure at some point in your career you will have to swallow a deal or advocate for something that you don't fully support, but it's what's best for the firm.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to, we were thinking as part of the Haas Politics and Policy Club of creating some sort of workshop series where we would get students to do public speaking routines or debate. We were thinking of, for example, assigning students a position they don't like on a controversial topic and getting them to, in small segments, in small groups, debate one another.
Right.
I know a few students at Haas have started something, and I know there's a very robust debate society, but if there are any students at Haas who are interested in this sort of idea, creating some sort of workshop or series where we can refine the aforementioned skills, I would be really open to talking with you, trying to sketch out a framework for what can be done. I mean, I have a lot on my plate right now, but I'm hoping if we can establish something formal by fall, we can really add a lot of value to the Haas and Berkeley community. So if any students are interested in this, please reach out to me or please reach out to the Haas Politics and Policy Club.
And we'll put Gagan's email on the podcast as well.
Yep.
That's a really great idea. I think to chime in on that, I know the Improv Club has similar ideas in terms of helping students break out of their shell. I think there may be some synergies there. If we can create some kind of, debate / improv setting for students to practice a workshop, that'd be great. Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in today. My aim is to bring the Haas community closer together through your stories. We're always looking for Haasies willing to share their stories and experiences so that we can give you more insights into the different programs, different careers, and ultimately different perspectives. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please feel free to email me for suggestions on how I can improve this podcast, or if you have any recommendations on people or content you'd like to hear. My email is reachsean@berkeley.edu. That's spelled REACHSEAN@berkeley.edu.